Writing therapy/narrative. Remembrance Grandma. My grandma is the most influential and beautiful presence in my life. She has watched over me through thick and thin, embracing me in a mothering light even when other light sources had otherwise faded, or extinguished. I have longed often to be by her side when we are apart. Within the past few years we have developed this little ritual, and she watched me as I drove away from a visit by standing in the bathroom window between the delicate curtains. It took her moving in her slow shuffling way with her walker all the way to the other side of the house to get there to wave and blow those kisses to me. But then surgery impaired her capacity to walk as fast, and yet I still drive around the house even though she can't make it over to that part of the building anymore, just to blow her a kiss as a sort of symbol, akin to a loving prayer. Last time I left she was there again by the window despite her pains. She made it there herself and opened the window wide, and we blew kisses and sent love to one another before I drove off. I cried like a wolf who calls mournfully in the night, only more fiercely so. On the ride home facing the long freeway ahead, my tears as potent as those of a wounded and motherless child. I recall when we were younger, Grandma would sing, and she would sometimes stomp her foot to the music or sing along to a song and sweep around the room. Her exuberant energy would carry me away sometimes. No one might ever understand our bond, but for me it was often those littlest and the most tender moments like that which meant the most to me. Sick days. My grandma would have my brothers, our cousin and I over sometimes for the weekend, or longer during the summers. These were the most blessed times for us, which nurtured us immensely. Some of those visits, however, I would have terrible colds and asthma. She would care for me so tenderly. She would tuck me into bed with layers of soft hand-sewn blankets. She would pile boxes of fabrics and odds and ends all around the outer perimeter of the bed so that there would be no risk of falling out of bed. Nobody would care for me so much before as to attend specially to my comforts, much less if I were to fall out of bed. I nestled into that care so trustingly. My spirit needed allowance to feel safe and cared for like children ought, pampered and talked to like little ones, warmly wrapped up, tucked in, sung to, read to, and given careful little room to explore and play and grow. During the times I was sick as a child, she would rub menthol cream all over my chest and run a vaporizer in the room with that soft subtle smell of mint settling about the room. She would bring little dollies to tuck into my arm beneath the blankets like it was another smaller child she was placing in my care. I have never felt safer in my whole life than I did in that cozy room, knowing she was only a few footfalls away if I were to feel cold, if I were to need to vomit, or if I just wanted someone to hug or talk to. She made me and my brothers and cousin her whole life, catering to us as if we were the most precious things she encountered in a given day. Garden. She had the same knack for plants, and she would plant the most beautifully elaborate gardens I had ever seen. Each year the seeds were carried from the plants she grew the year prior, and she knew just when to start them in the late winter, early spring, in little leftover styrofoam cups, old egg cartons, or clear bakery containers. Anything that could become a little bed for her seeds would do. I would marvel at just how much she would nurture them, keeping them in the sun just enough to do well and holding them up with tiny sticks if they got big enough to droop and sag. She knew the right light, water, and support that each needed to not just survive, but to truly thrive. Then after she got help tilling the ground in spring after the last frost, she would trowel and tuck those little plants and seeds into the earth like they were her children. Each day she would go out to visit them and to bring them cans of water, carefully sprinkled. She knew that they were alive and acknowledged their special needs. Some needed something to wind and crawl up, and some needed little fences surrounding them to hold up their heavy weight. On the hotter, drier days, she would take and clean old milk jugs full of water and puncture them in the bottom with a small nail holes before setting them beside each of the trees and bushes. She had pity on them that they would struggle in a drought, and knew that if she flooded them once they would only be thirsty again soon. This was her way of metering them water and giving them a chance to feel cared for elongated periods. As kids she would send us out there with pails sometimes to feed the trees water, and she made it a special mission and journey for us, so even though we felt it was work, we did not begrudge it. Each thing she touched would grow so beautifully that she could count on a bounty of a broad variety at harvest. She would grow beans, peas, tomatoes, carrots, radishes, kohlrabi, chives, cabbage, onions, pumpkins and squash too. The list would go on and on. Once they grew to maturity she would make sure their fruits or vegetables were as big as they could healthfully grow, and she would carefully pull the yield with care and gratitude, tucking the mounds of items into her upturned skirts. Once the bounty was inside the house, she knew how to clean and cook the vegetables to make them tender and delicious as could be. They would all mix together in the pot, sometimes with a whole chicken to create a soup, and other times fried or baked alone just as they were. The intricacies of cooking things down to near smoosh made them meld and gel together in beautiful ways. The heavenly aromatic blend and flavorful deliciousness to this day is difficult for me to duplicate. Cooking. When I was young, cooking a big meal for her children and all us grandchildren was a special weekly treat from Grandma. She would make each person what they wanted to the best of her ability, and all her burners were often bubbling with a variety of tasty treats. She would make large pots of soup that, when empty, seemed so tall a baby could sit inside of them. She would fill them with special soups and hearty batches of potatoes. Her turkeys were always huge enough that a whole family could feast off them, and there were plentiful sides too and fixings, and she managed cooking them all somehow so beautifully. I won't forget how while she was cooking I would wrap my arms around her waist or hanging from her dress, not wanting to be even a few steps from her side. She would move around and I would sort of trail along, and she would sort of try to brush me away, but I would come right back again. She would feed us potatoes just as they were finished boiling before they made it into potato salad, and each warm golden mushy nugget was lightly salty and buttered to taste. She would describe fondly how herself and her siblings, when they were young, also hung close to their mother like little birds waiting to be fed with their little beaks always open. I have always loved that imagery of the great grandma I never knew. I have seen adorable little pictures of my grandma when she was younger and felt she was so truly and solemnly pretty. Yet it seemed her full radiance hadn't occurred to her, and it seemed she shied away from cameras to an extent. I wish that her light and radiance could be known to her. Random memories. I looked at all of the receipts at work for snacks and treats which were bought for the girls at my job who attended an after-school mentoring program. They made me think of Grandma and how she always affirmed that I was worthy of such things too: makeup, food, outings. She never questioned if I was worthy of love, life hopes, dreams or spoils. Now I see she recognized that all girls, even those who struggle in painful life circumstances, needed that sort of certain and affirming love too. How distance from her hurts my heart. How much I miss her. The content of the memories flashing, fading like a dissociative ballerina, spinning in a slip-covered daze. Today rocking like a tiny baby. I just can't see how it's fair that she is aging and death is stealing her away. Beginning to let go Grandma. I told Grandma that I was sad because she was left behind sometimes as I went on living. To me it felt hard to partake in joys knowing her sorrows and trials of age. She was surprised about my proclamation and said, "But I've already lived my life, a good life with beautiful family and many wonderful times." It honored me so deeply to hear this because I said I felt I was falling in a deep pit and sorrowful alongside of her. She said it is as it should be, and it is as it has to be for her during this time of life. How she honors me with her deeply cultivated wisdom. Gratitude Grandma. Grandma sent money to help, and it's a major blessing now that we've begun the early stages of feeling to feel planted in our new home and art studio facility. I feel that she knows that I don't have a good sense of self-confidence to ask our family or the community to help with my needs in order to get startup help for a business. I also sense she knows that we are pure of heart and intention in this endeavor, hoping to offer something special unto the world that is unique. It was a godsend seeing her letter and her beautiful handwriting accompanying the money. She always wanted to have beautiful handwriting and yet felt so self-critical over her skills in that area. Yet, I tell her all the time it is distinct as a fingerprint to see her letters all drawn onto the envelope and the paper with a heart always sketched lovingly around the name. Things Grandma shared that are so applicable to my life forever. Her ideals of creating a forever home through emotional investments, building and tending to the sacred fires of the heart inside and all precious forever messages tucked inside of me. Retaining connections. Grandma. I have tried to call her a few times lately. Once before her birthday, once on her birthday and once afterwards. The phone kept clipping out, but she told me about my family and how they are all doing, which she earnestly calls family news. She shares with me how she made the trip to visit my uncle who is now paralyzed after a heart condition that nearly killed him and how there were many hugs and tears and how blessed it was to see her beautiful son and his family. She told me how another aunt needed a water heater and how amidst the humdrum day, this aunt loves her daughter and yearns for better days and more closeness among our family. She told me how my cousin's husband's heart has been bad for some time and now he finally needed a pacemaker. Each bit of news trickled in and filled me with a sense of the beautiful treasure our family is. To forever know both the joys and sorrows of each household, this has always been one of her greatest gifts unto me. As I remained near her, the stories of each family member poured unto me with such love. I grew to love each relative as near and dear to my own heart, and because her loving perspective lent, with gratitude and humility, I grew to understand her strength of her love for everyone, and it kept me going to also feel enveloped in such a great love. I hadn't considered until recently that most everyone else stayed on the boundary lands and maybe they didn't get such a sprinkling of this inside news which maybe could have nurtured them toward more kindred bonds and an overarching sense of connection too. This led to such a sad thought which recently came upon me because I realized that I am not sure how often the thought that my name and my story would also be known by the people I had come to love so dearly. I know that my family does not know it wholly, but she has given me every opportunity to know them through her stories, her news updates, her sense of love and care and worry for each of them in turn. I am the conduit carrying the family stories of her love with me and by proxy loving them simultaneously. I only hope I have a tender enough heart to be able to continue loving the people in my life as beautifully as she when her life leaves this place. We spent the last visit together filling out holiday cards. She wrote the inner message and I wrote the addresses on the envelope. I have helped her with holiday cards for as long as I can remember, and we would always do it with beautiful love and warmth between us. This year she was so hard on herself, judging her abilities to write, questioning her strength in her hand and generally holding herself to impossible expectations, even though each one was a tribute to the genuine love in her heart for her children and grandchildren. I saw her shake her hand and rub her inner palm to try and ease away the pain, taking breaks and spending many hours of the day working on the cards full of the loving messages she wanted to convey. Final wishes, acceptance of and expressed. Grandma. Grandma reminded me that she is not blaming anyone for her sense of lack of dignity in her later life as she finds herself needing more and more cares. Instead, she is activating within herself a sense that she is meant to go on this journey. It is her belief that with age she is being asked by the Lord to pare down her ego and humble herself in these moments of additional reliance as she ages. She is always so selfless, so willing to dig into her own being to find the answers and to not always seek to lay the blame anywhere else but within. It has always been her nature to do this, to spare others the pain of having to be chastised or asked to change their nature. It has been her eternal maternal blessing unto all of us to hold us all in a genuine embrace no matter who we are or what our list of faults or shortcomings may be. In her embrace we are all family and welcomed in and treated lovingly as equals. She told me that she is ready for her eternal rest and to meet the Lord, and that she is trying very hard to act and behave in ways befitting her deeper loving spirit. When she chastised briefly one of the family members for their somewhat questionable behavior, only to afterwards sketch a mark on her calendar so she could atone for those expressions of unfair judgment. I hold in my heart a fussy sort of childish prayerful plea, never expressing outwardly, because I know it is selfish to ask, can you stay with me as long as I want and need? Can you comfort me, shelter me enough that for the rest of my life I will feel like an utterly carefully planted and securely positioned seed? Regret, denial, and sorrow. Grandma. I was so sad leaving you last time I was there. It broke my heart, and I have had to turn to the ethers for strength to not say anything about the impatient cars that tailed me that day as I drove away. I am sad and have been since the visit. You are the angel in my life, the truest twin beneath my wings. The only one in this family who has truly cradled me in love. Hopefulness. Grandma. Help me see as Grandma pushed and pulled, obligatory cares forced without asking, dismissively. I pray for gentle dignity, pressed in by my lack of ability to be the sole caretaker she deserves, loving, pure and sweet. Thank you, Grandma, for letting me read the letter my mom wrote to you. Thank you for talking to me about the seeds you plan to start for us and for letting me bury my face in your neck when I hugged you. I have been praying fervently that the Lord will always be with you, embracing you in love. I am grateful my mother would rush fiercely to your aid and that she now loves me too. I have waited my whole life to hear that. I also have believed my whole life that you are the world's greatest love expressed in human form. Grandma, you are softer and stronger than you seem. Brighter than the known sky and sea. Swearing upon the sacred tablets of love that all I can do and all that I can be is pursued to beam light upon you. That is everything to me. Head on your shoulder listening to hymns from a lady who is dying of cancer on TV and has a last dream to sing hymns for people like her mother did when she was a wee one moves me. Seeing in the images of the approaching deathbed coming for this lady, Grandma's sweetness is clear as she sees the toil of witnessing death on TV. She turns off the bittersweet shows ending for our sake. She is preparing for her end and yet thinking of us and our need for a car and empathizing with the pain in my boyfriend's family. All of this love unto us expressed even though her leg feels it is ripped from the socket painfully from sitting reclined in her chair for hours of the day, having accidents in the bathroom and these deep troughs of difficulty and shame. I want to be her everything, to cater to her so deeply, and yet she is still able to say I can do this, just let me. But this is expressed only to me. Everyone else bearing her down to the core of her being, all of which she endures with such depth of humility it makes me feel breathless. Emptied of grief from weeping on the journey home, leaving the one who helps keep me tended and nurtured like a flower in the garden blossoming. How will I ever get by without her beside me? How can I help you find the eventual happy and holy death you seek? I am praying that life will guide me,